Hi there, fifth wheel owners. Today in your 2019 CrossRoads Redwood, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Hydrastar's 1600 PSI Hydraulic Brake Actuator. This kit comes with the actuator, as well as all the lines we'll need for our tandem axle trailer, as well as a breakaway battery and breakaway switch. We just got done converting over our trailer from its electric drum brakes to hydraulic disc brakes. We need a very high amount of pressure to operate our disc brakes on our trailer, which is why we want the 1600 PSI that's available in our actuator up there to ensure that we can properly get enough pressure to operate our disc brake system. Disc brakes are going to provide you with significantly reduced braking distance over your electric drum brakes. They're also going to be smoother in their application, so you're not going to have so much jarring when you hit the brakes. It's going to feel very natural. And just overall, it's going to be safer because you're going to have that reduced stopping distance. So in an emergency situation where you need to stop now, this is going to allow your trailer to not be pushing your vehicle, but stopping with it. With this kit, you'll receive the actuator and all the lines you'll need to install a disc brake setup. Now, the disc brakes and bearings you're going to need are going to be separate kits because it's going to vary depending upon the size of your trailer and the axles, the weight on the axles. So you'll want to use our fit guide to help determine the appropriate disc brakes for your trailer. But this kit's going to be a great setup for a tandem axle trailer. Why don't you follow along with us now and we'll show you how to get it installed. Along with your actuator system and all your lines, you are going to need your disc brakes and caliper to get everything installed. We've got kits here from Kodiak. That's what we're using on this trailer, and they're designed for the 8,000-pound axles on it. Once you've got your disc brakes installed, we'll now need to find the mounting location where we want to put our actuator. The actuator should be mounted in the front of the vehicle, and ideally you want to put it at the highest spot. It doesn't have to be, as it will pump, but it can make bleeding a little bit easier if it's in a high location. Our customer wanted his in his front compartment, just above his generator compartment here, so we put it right up in there. Now, since this is kind of a thin metal and it's kind of flexible, we used a piece of wood here. It's about a ½ inch thick, and we secured that to the metal first, and then we secured our actuator to both the block of wood and the metal below it. This way it's nice and securely mounted. It's not going anywhere. We don't want any movement out of it once we've got it on there. Now, your mounting location is going to vary depending upon the options and floor plan of your trailer and wherever you decide you want to put it. You will have to provide your own hardware. We're just using some nuts and bolts to get it in place, and you can pick those up at your local hardware store. Also included with your kit, you're going to receive a breakaway switch battery as well as your breakaway switch. You'll want to get this mounted as well. I recommend mounting it close to your actuator, as we are going to have to hook some of the wiring and stuff together. So we just mounted ours to the side of this panel with self-tapping screws. There's 2 on each side. Right below our battery, you're also going to see a circuit breaker. Now, this doesn't come included with your kit, but I highly recommend that you install one, as you don't want to ever run power to any components without having some sort of circuit protection in between in the event of any shorts occurring. This is a 40-amp circuit breaker, so it's going to be plenty high enough to handle the maximum load of our actuator. But in the event of a short, we'll have that protection there so we don't cause any damage to our wiring. You can get a circuit breaker just like this here at Etrailer.com. We've also got butt connectors and ring terminals, so you can get everything wired up to it. Now, you can see that I've already got some of it connected here, but I'm going to go ahead and show you a typical way that you'd wire it up. Off of our actuator here, we have 4 wires. You've got white, blue, yellow, and black. White is ground, so we just took it to a ring terminal, attached it to ground there. We are going to run another ground wire over to the battery to ensure that we have good ground from the chassis mounting location. The black wire here is our power wire. That goes to one post on our circuit breaker. The other post of the circuit breaker goes to our battery positive. The last 2 wires we have here is this blue wire and this yellow wire. Both of these, they do come pre-stripped like this. And the blue wire is going to be our brake signal wire from our brake controller, and the yellow wire is for our breakaway switch. So if the pin gets pulled, this is what tells it, hey, you've got to disconnect, apply the brakes. If we open up the junction box on our trailer, we can access all the 7-pole wiring that comes into it. The blue wire here is our brake signal wire from the brake controller on the vehicle that's going to be pulling our trailer. So we needed to make sure we know which one this was. And if we kind of just pull these wires back, we saw here that The blue wire goes into this duplex wiring here. And this duplex, the other one is a white wire that was normally hooked to ground to operate your electric brakes. You had a blue wire, or you have a brake signal wire and a ground wire to operate those. We don't need the ground wire anymore because we don't have electric brakes, so we can disconnect this, and we're actually going to use this wire so we don't have to route additional wires up here to get our breakaway switch and battery mounted up. I did have to run one additional wire. You can see this black wire here to get the full breakaway switch hooked up. And the way I got this wire here is I just took a coat hanger, I unraveled it out until it was nice and straight. I did keep the hook on one end so I had something to hold on to, and I just poked it in here and just pushed it until it went all the way out on the inside in our compartment there. Here you can see the wire on the inside in our compartment. I just used some electrical tape to tape it to the coat hanger, and then I pulled the coat hanger back through, and now I've got my wire going from my compartment out to our junction box. And here's our duplex wire. Now this wire, you are going to have to locate it. I did find it in this big wire loom harness up here, and I went ahead and just verified by testing it. Just if you got your truck hooked up, you can apply your electronic brakes, and you can just take a probe and poke into this wire to see if it illuminates your test light. I know that it did, so this is our brake signal wire, and this is that ground wire that you would use for electric brakes, but we're going to use this for our breakaway switch since they've already got it run for us. We don't need to run any additional wires. So since we located these wires here, I went ahead and already cut them so I can get them to about the right length that we're going to need. We know the blue wire off our actuator is for that brake signal coming from our brake controller, and we know this blue wire is the one coming from the junction box that does the same function, and it's already routed there. So we're going to strip it back. We're then going to take a butt connector. If you were wiring this outside of a compartment to where it's outside the vehicle, I'd highly recommend a heat shrink butt connector, but since we're in a compartment where it's protected from the elements, we can just use regular butt connectors and be okay. So we're just going to crimp it on one wire, and then the other wire pokes in the other side, and they're now attached. The yellow wires for the breakaway switch signal to activate it in the event of a catastrophic disconnect. We're going to use the white wire that was ground that's already routed up there and connect that to our breakaway switch out there. And just like we did with the other wire, we're going to crimp these two together. And now we've got all four wires from our actuator hooked up. So next thing we need to do is we're going to move on to the battery box that we've got here. This has our battery that is for our breakaway switch, as well as the battery to operate it in the event of that disconnect. Out of the bottom of our battery box here, for our breakaway switch battery, we've got three wires. You've got a black, a white, and a blue. The black is our power, which we hooked to the same post here on the circuit breaker that goes directly to the battery. This is not going through the circuit breaker, it's connecting directly to the battery positive. We don't want it to go through the circuit breaker, we want it to connect to the charge line circuit coming from our vehicle. And we know the charge line circuit is already hooked to our trailer's battery here to keep this battery charged, so that way it's also going to keep this battery charged. The ground, we just again hooked to the ground stud that we've got located here. And the last wire here is a blue wire, which is for the breakaway switch. So this wire here is what we connected to that black wire that we ran in, and we routed that out. So we've got power from our box going out. The white wire here is the return from our breakaway switch going to our system. We'll head to the junction box so you can see where those are connected together. We mounted our breakaway switch right here. Our customer already had one here, so we just removed the self-tapping screw and replaced it with the new one. It's a good idea to check this frequently, and since it came with a new one, it's a good idea to just go ahead and replace it, because these are a potential fail point, especially if not used for a long time, and you want to make sure that this works, because in the event of a catastrophic disconnect, this is what's going to make your trailer stop, and if the switch isn't working inside, nothing's going to happen. So that's why we made sure we put the new one on. The wires route down over here, going inside of our junction box, and it's the two black wires here. There's just two black wires coming off of the breakaway switch. Now, it doesn't matter which black wire is connected to which one. It's just an in and out switch. There's not one is particularly in and not one is particularly out. Either wire can function as either. So you can see this was the white wire we cut off the ground there that runs inside and connected to the yellow wire we attached to the actuator. And this is the black wire that we had run ourselves that connects to the blue wire from our battery box. Now that we've got the actuator all mounted up, we went ahead and wired it all up. We've got the disc brakes installed, so all our components are in the locations that they need to be in, so now we can start connecting them all together with the included brake lines. We're going to start with the longest brake line that comes in our kit, and it's going to attach into the back side of our actuator here, and we can snug that down using a 3/8" wrench. I highly recommend using a line wrench when tightening these down over a regular wrench, as you're going to get more contact and it's going to help prevent stripping out those fittings. They are brass, so it's a soft metal. That's why the line wrench is really recommended. We've got line wrenches here at Etrailer.com. Now, as you can see here, I routed it back down and across the wall in the actuator, and I did try to keep a slope to it and not go back up. That's just nice for gravity bleeding, so you can allow the fluid to just naturally travel down the line and go out. It can help making it bleed a little faster. And from here we did go around all these hoses here, so we could go through the wall over here. We did have to come a little bit towards the front of the trailer instead of being back here, so we could come out into the compartment where our propane tank is, right on the other side of this wall. Here you can see the brake line coming through the wall. I did take a piece of hose. It's kind of hard to see because it's dark there, but when I drilled the hole through the wall to ensure that it wasn't rubbing on, our hose isn't going to rub on any of the exposed metal, I just took a piece of vacuum line and I just cut it and slid it over the brake line just to ensure it had kind of like a gasket. And then from there we routed down, and really our propane pipe here, we kind of just follow that going straight back to our brakes. So we just follow this pipe going all the way back. You can see here we do have clamps. These come included with the kit, and we just use the self-tapping screws to run it in the frame. And we're just going to keep on going down. I tucked it in between the little gussets and stuff here. Again, just staying right tucked next to this because we know this is already routed in a way where nothing's going to damage it. So we might as well just stay close to it to ensure our line's going to be in a nice, safe position. Our line's going to come out of our compartment, and the propane line goes underneath the frame. So we follow it and go underneath the frame with it, just clamping it, staying there along the way. Once we get back here towards our suspension, we do need to make sure we route our lines out around that, but we are securing them still along the way, trying to bend them in a way too to ensure that they're not rubbing on anything while we're doing that. Our line then comes back, and we make a small loop with it here, and we go into our relay block. To assist you with bending your lines, as if you're just bending them by hand, it can be easy to accidentally kink the line, and then once you've done that, that line's pretty much useless. It's very difficult to get the kink back out of it, and even if you do get the kink back out, it has weaken the integrity of the metal, and you're just looking for potential issues in the future. So using the proper tool will ensure you can get good angles without damaging the line. Once we've gone into the relay block here, we've mounted this relay block just above our caliper for the closest brake. We're on the driver's side, so this is the driver's side front. But from here we need to branch off to the rest of our disc brake assemblies. We have one line right here that goes across to the other side, and this line here just routes back to the axle right behind us. Right here at the axle behind us, we use the union that comes with it to attach it to the brake hose, and then we attach our brake hoses into our calipers. Whenever possible, you want to feel for any cross braces and things like that so you can get your brake line securely mounted, because we want as little flexibility and movement on our line as possible. Our other line that goes across, we just followed the brace that's here between our equalizers, securing it along the way until we go to the other side. Here we need to go into another fitting that's going to allow us to branch to both the disc brake on the front axle as well as the one on the rear. The front axle is just going to have a brake hose that will go into it, that goes down to the caliper. This is the line that went across, and this one is going to go to the brake caliper on the rear axle on the passenger side. Again, we had to use a union on the other end of this brake line to attach it to the brake hose. All of these fittings do come in your kit. Now you might notice that the brake line on the front axle is a little bit different than the ones that come in your kit. We did replace it with longer hoses due to the angle just being uncomfortable. We were worried about rubbing against the tire and other components, so by having a little bit longer hose, we were able to get a better angle. This one has a 90-degree pre-bent in it to help us get that better angle, and it's available here at Etrailer.com. I do not recommend bending the ones that come in your kit at a 90-degree. I would highly recommend just purchasing one that has it. So now we've got everything installed, we need to bleed the brakes. So we're going to go ahead and remove the cap. Just go ahead and take it off and fill it up with .3 or .4 brake fluid. We're going to be using .3, but .4 will also work, and you can get it at your local automotive store. We'll then want to fill up our reservoir and then we can begin bleeding the brakes. You will likely need an assistant when bleeding the brakes due to the length of the trailer. You kind of can't be at both ends at the same time. We're now back at the passenger rear brake caliper. You want to start at the caliper that's furthest from your actuator. Ours is mounted pretty close to the center, but since we routed the lines down the driver's side, that makes this one the furthest distance away. We're then going to bleed this one and progressively get closer to the actuator, going in the order of furthest to closest, bleeding them. Now, you don't have to use a little hose like this, but it can help minimize the mess, as this is going to shoot out of here with some pretty good pressure, and you're going to have a lot of cleanup. Brake fluid's very destructive on paint and other surfaces like that, so you really want to try to minimize getting it on things. If you do get it on something, just make sure you clean it up right away. So we're going to poke this hose on it and go down to our catch tray down here. And when I loosen the bleeder screw here with my 5/16 wrench, I'm going to have the assistant pull the pin to start pumping the fluid. The assistant also needs to keep an eye on the fluid level, because if the system goes dry, you have to start all the way over. So he needs to make sure he keeps that topped up while you're doing this. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up. Go ahead and pull the pin. Go ahead. You can see it shooting out. We're going to go ahead and stop it. This already looks pretty good. We did gravity bleed it. We're going to close it up. And since we didn't really have too many bubbles there, we can move on to the next wheel. We're going to go ahead and do this one more time just to make sure there's no bubbles. If you do see a bunch of bubbles going down your clear tubing like this, that means you've got air in the system and you need to continue to bleed until you get it with nice solid stream of fluid through here. Remember that assistant needs to keep topping up that reservoir as we go. So let's just do this one more time just to make sure everything's nice and clean. Go ahead and pull the pin. Oh yeah, and that is nice and solid, so we're going to close it up. Go ahead and stop. And you can see there's no bubbles in any of that, so we're just going to pull that off and it'll finish draining down. We're now just going to move on to the next one that's furthest away. Repeat that process at each one until they all come back with nice solid stream of fluid. Once you finish bleeding, you can then reinstall the cap. You don't want the cap on it when you're bleeding, as the little rubber seal here can actually get pulled out and it could potentially damage it. So now that we've finished the bleeding process, we're going to put that back on, and then we're going to activate the brakes and check to make sure we have no leaks in our system. To check for leaks, I'm just going to pull the breakaway pin, and then I'm going to check every fitting to make sure that there's no fluid coming from them. You want to check each one very thoroughly, because sometimes it can be leaking out very slowly, so I like to actually just touch them and see if I get anything on my finger. We want to make sure we check all the ones here at the brake calipers, nice and dry, as well as all the unions and fittings that we have here. Everything is coming back nice and dry, so we know we've got no leaks in our system. You can reinsert the pin now to stop the actuator. We just needed that actuator running to keep everything pressurized to make sure this could handle a fully loaded hydraulic system. And that completes our look at Hydrastar's 1600 PSI Hydraulic Brake Actuator Kit on our 2019 CrossRoads Redwood.